Hello everybody, welcome along to this video. Mr. Johnson teaches Macbeth, Act 4, Scene 1. Here we are at the very start of Act 4. So previous to this we've had Macbeth receiving predictions from the witches, that creating an ambition in him and his wife conspiring and murdering the king together, Macbeth committing further murders or having murderers murder his best friend to keep the secret so he can hang on to the crown. And now we've got all of that evil and bloodshed going on. We then move into Act 4. It's an important scene, really important scene, and quite a long scene as well. And this video probably will be a little bit longer just because there's a lot to capture in here, but very much worth watching the way through, because this really illustrates the change in Macbeth from the loyal and noble soldier we first hear about in Act 1 Scene 2 to this man who is now a bloodthirsty tyrant. A reminder, Macbeth is part of your GCSE English literature. You'll find it in paper 1 section A, making it the first question that you sit within your English exams. So let's move on then in a scene summary. At the very beginning we start with the witches creating a spell around a cauldron and throwing lots of evil things in. Macbeth then arrives and asks them for their guidance. They cause visions to appear to him. They make these predictions to him, including the ones on the screen there, which are about nothing. He cannot be defeated until Birnam Wood moves to Dunsinane Hill, which is something which seems crazy because the woods are nowhere near this hill. And no one born from a woman can harm him is another prediction, making him feel invincible because surely everyone is born of woman. But also they tell him to beware Macduff. Macbeth ends the scene by deciding that he's going to have Macduff killed, and not only that, also his wife and his children and anyone who gets in his way when they're there. Key characters in this scene. Macbeth features, as do the witches. Hecate is there in the background. She has the odd bit here, but she really is a very background character, which is why some people think that is why she was added to the play as a later version. But keep it simple, Macbeth and the witches, and then later on, as on the screen there, Lennox arrives after all the action, giving him some news. So those are the key characters in this scene. And let's get going then. So we've got this cavern. It's meant to be the pit of Acheron, but there's this boiling cauldron going on there, which already sort of creates an evil feeling. And then we've got that pathetic fallacy, as always with the witches, thunder, and enter the three witches. Now this whole bit here I've summarised into the arrows, where we've got them conjuring this spell, which really adds to them idea. It's a very stereotypical thing, but it would really make the audience realise just how evil and witch-like they are. And the yellow bits I've highlighted for you are lots of typical ingredients, as I've put there, to show the audience how evil they are. We've got toads, snakes, newts, frogs, bats, dogs, adders there, little owlet's wings, like a baby owl's wings. There's lots of this horrible stuff. And then that second arrow just points out we've got double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble, which are very famous and quoted lines from this play. Throughout this, notice how they're talking in rhyme all the way through, and it's got a beat to it as well, a certain rhythm, but it's not iambic pentameter, which is a normal beat. It's a much shorter beat, and it almost has this much more evil connotation to it as well. You can look it up. I believe it's some sort of tetrameter. It's to do with beats of threes. Then they move on. They repeat that refrain of double, toil and trouble. I've highlighted in yellow there some more sort of evil ingredients they're throwing in there. And just on the arrow, just went for some really horrible ones as well. We've got the finger of a birth-strangled babe, ditched delivered by a drab. The finger of a baby which was strangled at birth by its mother, who was a prostitute. Now, if you just think about that, just how twisted and horrible that is, that's exactly what Shakespeare's trying to do with these witches. He's just trying to make you realise just how terrible they are, and therefore by Macbeth going back to these witches and seeking their advice, that tells you something about how disturbed his mind must be, or how power hungry he is, to actually go there believing and wanting to find out more from them. We've got other bits going on there, but then this bit, which is the second witch, says, by the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes, which I've highlighted in pink for you, indicating that that is one of the key lines that you want to write down and highlight somewhere in your notes. I've put there, it shows the complete change in how Macbeth is addressed, how much he's changed as well, that the witches are addressing him as wicked, which seems a tad ironic. I hope you agree, that witches are referring to this soldier, but now this bloodthirsty tyrant as wicked. It shows you how far that character has developed, and you could contrast that quote there with an earlier quote about Macbeth being worthy or brave. It's very much not anymore. In comes Macbeth. And his first line to him, "How now, you secret black and midnight hags?" He asks them what they're up to, and then I highlighted for you his imperatives, those demands and commands that he gives the witches, and it's a repeated one as well. Answer me, answer me. He is now demanding. He doesn't just want to ask nicely, he's demanding this information from the witches. He goes on in the middle there, which I've summarised in that arrow. Even though he knows that witches make terrible things happen, like castles topple on their warders' heads, on the owners' heads, he still wants to hear from these witches, and he asks them, "To what I ask you." He wants to hear more. "Speak, demand, we'll answer," say the witches. "Would you like to hear it from our mouths or from our masters?" This I've put in that arrow there, just sort of summarised or translated for you. They throw into their spell a mother pig's blood. This mother pig has eaten her young, and which is horrible enough. And they also add in some sweat from a murderer who's about to be hanged, which again just shows you just how disgustingly evil they are, really. And then there's these different appearances of sort of strange apparitions like outlines and spirits and that. This one is an armed head, which again is possibly foreshadowing of Macbeth's fate there. This idea of a head, because Macbeth does become or is decapitated at the end of the play. There should be no spoilers there. You should know that by now. So then these apparitions appear. And Macbeth, 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 beware Macduff, beware the Thane of Fife. Dismiss me enough. So we've got rhyme going on through all of this as well. Prediction number 1 I've summarised for you. Macbeth needs to beware of Macduff. For some reason he is a threat to Macbeth. Right? Macbeth is happy with that. He says thank you. Then in the middle there's a stage direction. There's a bloody child appears out of on the stage here to give the second prediction. Macbeth, Macbeth, Macbeth. Had I 3 ears, I'd hear thee. That's meant to be Macbeth trying to be funny. And then he says, "Be bold, bloody bold and resolute. None of woman born shall harm Macbeth," is that second prediction. So, as I've put there, no one who's born from a woman can harm Macbeth, which reassures him and in many ways makes him overconfident, because Macbeth believes that means he's invincible, because surely everybody is born of a woman, or so he believes. So there we go. There's our first 2 predictions. Our third apparition we have come in here is, our third apparition there is a child crowned with a tree in his hand. And I won't go into that too much now, but basically we've got sort of different flattering. King James watching this, they were trying to flatter him by having these different apparitions. But basically, Macbeth says at the very top there, "Live Macduff, why should I be afraid of you? Because surely you're born a woman," which means I shouldn't be afraid. "But I'll make assurance double sure. So I'll be absolutely certain and take a bond of fate. Basically, I shall swear you shall not live." Later on, down at the bottom there, the third apparition says, "Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Birnam Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come against him." Simply, as I've put there, Macbeth shall not be defeated until Birnam Wood comes to Dunsinane Hill, which are 2 very separate locations. So once again, this sounds like it's surely impossible. Well, this means I'm safe. These witches are seemingly giving him very good news, and he should be happy with it. "That shall never be," as Macbeth says. "Who can make the forest unfix its earthbound root?" So its roots are stuck in the earth. Who can make them move? Surely everything is fine. But then he goes on there, and I've put there with the arrow. He asks about Banquo's children. He says, "Shall Banquo's issue," meaning his children, "ever reign in this kingdom?" As in being kings and queens. But they all say, "Seek to know no more." He wants to know. He says, "Deny me this, an eternal curse fall on you." Yes, he calls a curse on witches, which just shows again he is now cursing other people. He is just such a dark character now, and a changed character from the Macbeth at the beginning. But then we got show. This line of 8 kings come in. The last one's holding up a mirror. Banquo's ghost is there as well. I've tried to summarise it there on the right. A line of kings descending from Banquo, possibly trying to flatter the real James I. James I believed that one of his distant descendants was Banquo, so it's almost literally trying to have like a line of kings sort of leading up to Banquo, sort of flattering the king. But we won't go on that in too much more detail. You can find out more about that in different revision guides and bits online if you do some Googling. The apparitions all vanish, then the witches are left there, and basically there we're done. The last appearance of the witches I wanted to point out here, so this is it, the witches are done in the play now, and they have an ominous, like a threatening last couplet, this pair of rhyming lines, foreshadowing Macbeth's downfall at the end of the play. "That this great king may kindly say, our duties did his welcome pay." he got what he deserved, and we paid him what he deserved, which is, of course, leading him to his downfall. They're gone, they disappear. In comes Lennox, one of the other Thanes. Macbeth asks him, did you see the weird sisters? No. They didn't come by you? No. He says, I love that line as well. This sort of links to how dangerous the witches are. Macbeth says, infected be the air where they ride, and damned all those who trust them, which is ironic because, of course, he is trusting them as well. Macbeth talks about, I heard the galloping of horses. Lennox delivers news that Macduff has fled to England and basically run away. And then these two quotes are absolutely brilliant. This is the end of the scene now. Macbeth basically sort of talks about the deeds and what he needs to do next. The first one is, from this moment, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand. We've heard a little bit of this already earlier in Act 3, but I've put the arrow there. This is a massive change from Macbeth from Act 1, Scene 7, where he was nervous about killing the king and really debating what he should do and just wasn't sure what to do and was almost dithering, to the impulsive Macbeth now. I've translated it for you there. The first thing I want is what I shall do, which was what it means by the firstlings of my heart. What I want is inside his heart, shall be the firstlings of my hand, which is where you do your action. Your hand is your actions. He says then, straight after it, to crown my thoughts, be it thought and done, the castle of Macduff I will surprise, seize upon Fife, which is where it is, give the edge of the sword, his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line. As I've said there, Macbeth plans to have everyone in Macduff's castle murdered. Now, the witches never told him to do that. This is Macbeth now becoming properly impulsive, almost over-ambitious. He's so ambitious and so desires to want to hang on to the crown, he's willing to do everything and anything, including what he's just said there, the murder of everybody in there. He even calls them unfortunate souls. Key themes, the supernatural, of course, linking to the witches, the violence that we've just heard that Macbeth wants to commit, the hubris, that overconfidence in his own ability now, which the witches have caused by making predictions which sound like, well, nothing can happen to him anymore, because surely those things won't happen. And the idea of power and the desperate clinging on to power that Macbeth shows in this scene. Some quick revision questions for you to pause this screen and have a go at those somewhere, just to test your understanding. All of these questions are answerable if you've watched this video properly all the way through. If you haven't, then go back and watch them again. Rewatch little bits just to make sure you're able to answer those questions. And I just wanted to end with this and talk to you about this, the idea of hubris and hamartia. I've talked about these in different places, but in case you're not familiar with what these are, hubris, it comes from Greek tragedy. It's an overconfident person who so believes in their own ability that they're almost blind to anything else because they're just so confident, and therefore another good word for it would be overconfidence. And Macbeth absolutely has demonstrated that in this scene. And hamartia is another word which links to Greek tragedy, and basically it's the downfall, the character's downfall, what leads them to have a demise, which is another word for often for failing and sort of bad things happening to them, very often that being death. And absolutely in this play it is the death of Macbeth at the end, and that his hamartia, you could argue, is his hubris. The hubris leads to his downfall. So I hope this video has been useful. As I say, I know it's a long one, but it's an absolutely pivotal and key scene for the play with some really good useful quotes in it. I hope you found this video useful. A reminder that you can check out my other videos on the channel, which leads to also summaries of other scenes, but also where I sort of go down into some more depth of different bits of the play. Thank you for watching for this video all the way through, and I wish you the very best of luck when it comes to your exams. Goodbye.